Hello everybody, what's going on out there? Today I want to show you a game from the Tata Steel Chess Tournament from January of 2017 between GM Eric Hansen, who you see on the bottom of the screen, and GM Jeffrey Xiongs on the top of the screen with the black pieces. And of course, as usual, up here to my right is a random chess player. And if you know who she is, just let us know in the comment section. And this is just my way of reaching out to all you guys and sharing my love of chess with you by just introducing the different chess players all around the world. It could be male and female, but I do like to put the female chess players up on the videos. So again, if you know who she is, just let us know in the comments. So let's get to the game. Eric started out with e4, knight f6, Alekhine Defense by Jeffrey Xiongs. e5, knight d5, d4. Let me just say, without going too deep into the analysis, that the only way that white can really claim an advantage is by playing e5 early in the game. Um, all of those other moves like knight c3, um, d3, they might lead to interesting positions, but um, in theory, black really does not have to worry about these variations. For instance, if somebody plays this against me, I often just play knight c6. And I'm not one of those Alekhine players who are afraid to transpose into e4, e5 openings, because when I first started playing chess, that's how I played. My favorite player was Anatoly Karpov, and he played e4, e5 early in his career, and I just copied his repertoire. So I have no problem playing e4, e5, because a lot of players will try to play, say, like knight c3, and figure that if you play the Alekhine, you're afraid to drop that e pawn on the e5 square and just go into a Vienna. But I know this too is equal for black. So if you want to stay true to the Alekhine defense, so you can play this, and a lot of players study this. But again, I didn't want to get too deep into theory. So the game continued: e4, knight f6, e5, and the d6. Hansen played knight f3, which is the modern defense, and this defense scores the highest for white. There's also another good option for white, and that's just playing c4 and then just playing the exchange variation. Now, the more dynamic black players will take with the c pawn and go for this counterplay on the c file, fianchetto the bishop, castle, knight c6. Sometimes this bishop become the g4 or f5, and with dynamic and unbalanced play. Other players that like to play with a more steady hand, so to speak, will uh, take with the e pawn. And black's position is a little bit safer, but as you can see, has a little bit fewer prospects when it comes to attacking, but has a solid reputation. Well, Hansen opted for the modern defense, knight f3, and here black has many different options. He can play c6 here. He can take, and he can also just play g6 as Jeffrey did in the game. This is an old variation that went out of favor a long time ago. Matter of fact, it's called the Albert variation, and it's named after Grandmaster Lev Albert, who for many years was one of the few grandmasters at a high level that played this defense faithfully. Um, Bishop c4 was played, and I just want everyone to know that there was a match in 1985 between the young Nigel Short and Lev Albert, and it was an 8-game match, and all of the white games that Nigel had, he played e4, and which was 4 games, and Lev Albert played knight f6 in response to e4 in all of those games, and he also lost all of those games. I did an analysis on this match, so if you look on my playlist, um, Alekhine Specialist versus Alekhine Destroyer, that is about that match where I analyzed those 4 games. But moving on, bishop c4, and this is one of the main tabbies right here, this Albert variation. So bishop c4, c6. Albert would play, he would try different things, but he would play knight b5, followed by d5, and such. Castles, bishop g7. Hansen plays e takes, queen takes d6, rook e1, castle c3, bishop g4, knight bd2, and knight d7. Now this position takes on similarities to your average and typical Karo-Slav formation, where black is trying to achieve the breaks c5 and or e5. Now normally in these type of positions it's more difficult to achieve the break e5 due to white's influence on these squares. Usually the rook is on e1, the semi-open e file, knight on f3 as you see here, and the pawn on d4. So although it would be ideal for black to make the e5 break, it's usually just too difficult, and black uh, breaks at with c5, and you see this in the Karo-Khan, Slav, Queen's Gambit Decline, and such. So it's the same type of pawn structure with similar ideas. But if black could have his wish, he would break with e5. And here you see the struggle here with for the center. Bishop comes to g4 to put that pin on the knight, and Hansen plays natural move h3, and Jeffrey parts with the bishop here. Now this is very committal. It's early in the game, and black has given up the bishop here. Now often in these type of structures, it reminds me of the modern Benoni, as a matter of fact, where black usually just gives up that bishop if he can. He plays the a6 and bishop g4 variation, and he just gives up that bishop for a knight, because that bishop often plays a minuscule role in the game and often gets in the way. Remember that white has more space. He occupies the first 4 ranks, and with black being slightly cramped, he wants to create some room, and that is one of the ways he does it. However, there's a price to pay in giving up the bishop pair so early, because you never know how the game is going to open up, and you could pay later on for the bishop pair being gone, especially the light square on the light squares. So let's see how it unfolded. So here Jeffrey played e6. Now I prefer to continue the fight to try to get the actual e5 push in. Not that he might get it, but just to fight for it until Hansen commits to actually stopping it from being possible. Because after all, you have your queen here on d6, knight here, bishop here, and now you have the rook here. So let us say queen b3. Here's a sample line attacking this pawn. Now rook a b8. And let's say bishop d3. And now e5. And this would be ideal for white. I'm just glancing at my notes here. Say bishop d2, e takes d4, c takes d4, knight 7 to b6, and a4. And black has solved his major problem here. Although white has this isolated pawn, it still has good prospects, because the good side of the isolated pawn is that it controls squares. So black later on might wind up trading this pawn anyway, although he would like to blockade it as you see here and try to win it if he can. But nevertheless, black has adequate play in this position, and that's why I like to move rook e8. E5 is possible right now. I know some of you might be um, thinking about this. You know, what about e5? Well, it could be a little premature here. Let's see. D takes e5. Knight takes e5. Knight takes e5. Bishop takes e5. Queen b3. b6. Bishop takes d5. C takes d5. Bishop h6. Rook fe8. Rook a d1 and rook a d8. So you can see now black has an isolated pawn and white has some slight pressure around the dark squares. Nothing too crazy, but something that you still have to be mindful of. So e5 be a little premature there possibly. So Jeffrey played e6, and so this lets me know that he plans on making this break here. Now this is very important, as you'll see in a minute. So a4 was played by Hansen. Wishing to expand on the Queenside over here, of course. And Jeffrey plays this move a5. Now, in these Alekhine systems, often you'll get this early in the game, a4, when the knight is on b6. White will play a4, and then black will play a5 immediately, so the knight on b6 won't get driven away. Here, the knight is not on b6, so it's questionable whether it was necessary to play that move a5 to stop white from gaining more space. However, it's very important because I had said that black, since he didn't play e5, that he's planning on playing c5. Now the problem is, since you giving up the b5 square by playing a5, you have to be careful, because now when you achieve your break, the b5 square will be very weak and vulnerable to the occupation of the white pieces. Bishop g5, knight 7 b6. So we see Jeffrey keeps the b6 square safe with the move a5, so he can place his piece there. Bishop f1, just keeping the bishop preserved for later. And now c5. So Jeffrey has achieved his break, but b5 falls into white's hands. Let's see how critical that's going to be. Hansen immediately seizes this square after queen b3, and you can see the buildup of all the forces immediately on this square. Rook f to c8, rook a d1, h6, bishop back to c1, rook d8. Knight comes to the center. Again, another piece on this square. Rook to d6. Knight b5. Rook d7. g3. Rook a d8. h4. Knight c8. This knight is on its way to d6. And now knight a3. So we see trying to fight for the square. Hansen pulls out, and he plans on going to d4 with his d6 to stop that. But now knight c4 anyway. And the idea, of course, is to offer this exchange of these two pieces so that white could dominate b4, b5 with another piece. So Jeffrey plays knight f5, and now he's entertaining ideas of knight takes g3. As you can see, this pin on the king here, on this pawn rather. So Hansen offers the trade of queens. Queen c7, rook to d3, rook c8, rook f3, and this is a defensive and attacking move, of course, protecting the kingside pawns and also eyeing f7. Now b6 is played. Knight, knight fe7. Sorry, white moves first. Queen b3 happened first. Now knight fe7. Rook swings back to d1. And now knight f5 again. Knight a3, and now Hansen is ready to hop his knight back into b5. And now here, with the pressure, Jeffrey makes a mistake, and now his idea is to play bishop to c5, using the bishop to pin the f2 pawn so that he can possibly take on the g3 square. The problem is that there's a good idea and concept, but there's a tactical flaw that Hansen has spotted. So with that in mind, the better idea is just simply knight f6, knight b5, queen c5, and for instance, rook takes d7, knight takes d7, bishop f4, knight f6, with the equal game for black. Yes, black has this weakness right here, but it's not big enough to really turn the tides of the game. White would have to create additional problems in the black position for it to get serious. However, I think that Jeffrey overlooked Hansen's response, and because the idea looks great. The knight a3, right, to get the bishop active, bring the bishop here, and you have some pieces swarming around the king. After all, Hansen has compromised his king side somewhat, but he misses a key idea. And after knight b5 hitting the queen, queen b8, Hansen just simply presses on with h5. Bishop c5 comes, so Jeffrey still presses with his idea, and after h takes, f takes, Hansen just simply played the move bishop f4, hitting the queen, and just basically refuting the entire concept. The reason is because of this hanging piece here. After the move knight b5 hitting the queen was forced to move. This left the rook on d7 unprotected, and now the entire concept is refuted because this knight is paralyzed, as this rook would then hang if the knight were to capture on f4. So queen b7, bishop g2, and now the tactics all are in white's favor. So now you have x-ray tactics now. Jeffrey just decides to go back. Now, a last-ditch effort. Knight takes f4, rook takes, and this could have been acceptable for white here. Excuse me, for black. Queen e7, queen e1, and say queen d7, for example. And yeah, you see the weaknesses in a black position, but he still he has his work cut out for him, of course, but it would be better than the continuation that took place in the game. So after queen b7, bishop g2, and this move rook f8, rook fd3, again just exploiting this confusion by black on the d file. And now, as usual, the usual thing that happens when one tries to employ tactics from an inferior position, usually the tactics backfire. So here, Hansen has his pieces all in excellent positions. Okay, this is textbook. All of his pieces are great. His king is safe, and then you see black lashing out with this G pawn. Um, the hairs stand up on your head because you know there has to be some type of refutation here. Um, White has black pieces woefully pinned. Right, there's this pin here. There's a pin here. The king side is exposed horribly, and White's pieces are beautifully coordinated and developed. So you know there has to be something here, and Grandmaster Hansen found it, and he just played Rook takes D5, powerful move that's exploiting this. Put this pin on this diagonal. There's pins everywhere. So Rook takes D5, E takes D5, Rook takes D5, and the position just pretty much plays itself. Sorry, it was this rook, Rook D, F7, but unfortunately just walking right into another pin. Hansen played Rook takes C5, unveiling this bishop here. Queen ran to E7, and now he just simply took the knight. Of course, this is pinned. And G takes F4, and Rook takes F4, and Jeffrey Xiongs resigned. So that was a real brutal ending in that game. He made that tactical oversight with Bishop F8, and that kind of and the idea with Bishop C5 that he carried through, and the position just immediately collapsed. A beautiful game by Eric Hansen. I hope you enjoyed that. Remember, there's links below. Hit the